Hey guys, Will here. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to our video series on setting up a racing simulator. So as you can see, I'm sitting in my FGT cockpit now from Next Level Racing and we're pretty much set up ready to go. The only thing missing now is a monitor or TV setup. So I said in the last video that I was still sort of trying to debate what I wanted to do in terms of a display. The monitor mount which I have here can support up to 3 27-inch displays or one up to 65-inch single display. And I've sort of been tossing up what I would like to do. I've never been a fan of triple screen setup simply because I don't like having a line right where you're looking to spot your apex, and especially on a cockpit setup like this, you really do want to sort of be able to turn and look at where you're going, and you can't really do that when you've got a big bezel sitting right down in the middle of where you're looking. So what I decided ultimately was to go with a single monitor setup. So what we'll be doing in this video is getting that all set up on the rig and checking it out and basically seeing whether I've made a huge mistake or whether it's all going to work out the way I hope it will. So let's get stuck into it. Now for perhaps the most satisfying part of the entire build. I don't know why that always feels so satisfying, but it does. Okay, so the missus is happy. The rig is back out of the living room and back into my study area. And as you can see beside me, we have a brand new Samsung 8 Series NU8500 55-inch curved 4K TV. What a mouthful. So what we're going to do in this section of the video is take a look at it, talk about some of the reasons why I've chosen this screen in particular for the build, and cover a bit of that sort of stuff off in a little bit more detail to answer some of the questions that you guys might have regarding choosing a screen for your setup. So when we talk about TVs and gaming, often they can get a pretty bad rap for having what's basically described as bad input lag. So a lot of people get confused between the difference between response time and input lag. So let's just explain that quickly first here. Response time is the time it takes for a pixel on the screen, so a dot on the screen, to react to a change. So the TV basically says, all right, I want you to do this, and the pixel reacts. So we're talking about going from dark to light or from light to dark or whatever. So that is the response time of the panel itself, and it operates independent of whatever other processing and that kind of thing that's going on in the background. And this will make a little bit more sense a little bit later in the video once we've talked about how image processing works and stuff like that as well. But what input lag is it's factoring in all of the different factors that take place between when you actually make a movement on the input device and when you see a reaction on the screen as a result of that. So input lag is really what you need to be looking at here. Now this TV in particular, it quotes a response time of as slow or as fast as 8 milliseconds, but the reality is the input lag is more like between 10 milliseconds if you're looking at 1080p at 120 hertz, or more like 15 to 16 milliseconds when you're looking at 4K at 60 hertz. So what does that mean in the real world? Well, what we'll do is we'll actually take a look at exactly what the lag is like on this particular screen. So let's take a look at that now. Okay, so to demonstrate the difference in input lag between resolutions and refresh rates, we're going to try a bunch of different resolutions and refresh rates and have a look at the differences. So apologies for the flicker on the screen. Unfortunately, that's not avoidable when we're adjusting refresh rates here because we can't compensate around it. So we'll start off with 1920 by 1080 at 120 hertz. And you can see here when we move the wheel, very, very, very little input lag there at all. Absolutely minimal. Then we'll jump up to the highest resolution we can do with still retaining 120 hertz, remembering that at 4K resolution, HDMI 2.0 standard doesn't support more than 60 frames per second or 60 hertz. So we'll jump down to video mode again and go up to 2560 by 1440 at 120 hertz again, or 119 hertz. There's a little bit more lag there. Not a whole heap though. Still definitely say that that's acceptable. And then we'll go back to 4K, remembering that we've got HDR turned on for all of these tests as well. So we are giving it a worst case scenario kind of environment. So we'll go back down to graphics options once more. And we'll go up to 4K resolution, so 3840 by 2160. We don't need to worry about cinematic 4K, we'll just go to regular 4K. And 60 Hertz this time, because we can't go past 60 Hertz. So you can see there's definitely more lag in 4K resolution, but it's still, I think that's still acceptable. Like it hasn't created a problem for me in the little bit of driving that I've done so far, but we'll definitely play around, find where the sweet spot is. I'll just quickly turn off HDR as well and just see the difference that that makes. So video mode, HDR off. No discernible difference really there with HDR off. And we'll just go back to a best case scenario quickly as well. So we'll go back to 1080, 120 Hertz with HDR off. Okay. Yeah, and you can see there's very minimal lag. I can't see the difference between HDR on and off with 1080p, but obviously the screen resolution there is pretty horrible. I would definitely not want to play the game at 1080. But yeah, not a whole lot of input lag there, but that gives you a good visual indication of exactly what we're dealing with. So once I determined that I wanted a 55-inch screen and I wanted it to be curved, the next objective was to find the one with the best possible or the lowest possible input lag. So this is how I ended up basically determining that the NU8500 was going to be the best choice for me. Obviously there's other factors there as well in terms of, you know, things like screen refresh rate and stuff like that, as well as the quality of the panel too. So Samsung have always had really good quality panels, very, very good contrast ratio, stuff like that. So that was all a factor in the decision as well. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about refresh rate as well, because this is another area that people can trip up a little bit. So when you see a TV advertised, often they'll advertise crazy high refresh rates. Like, I mean, I remember a couple of years back when I used to work at Sony, we used to have TVs that were like 1,000, even I think 1,200 Hertz TVs. And so people thought that that meant that the refresh rate was really quick and you got a really, really smooth image. And look, unfortunately, it's not really quite that simple. What TV manufacturers do, and they all have their own way of doing this, but basically what they're doing is they're working in their picture processing, things like image interpolation and backlight blinking and events like that into the overall refresh rate. So what they're saying is that for every refresh of the actual screen, so for every frame of data that's actually coming into the screen, we're generating a backlight blink and an interpolated frame or a recreated frame to add smoothness and things like that. And they're including that in the count of total frames. So what that actually means is that even though you might have, say, a 200 Hertz TV, which this is actually marketed as, the actual refresh rate or the native refresh rate of the panel is often a lot lower. And we're also limited, as I mentioned briefly earlier in the video, by the actual HDMI 2.0 protocol itself. The data throughput of that protocol actually won't allow for refresh rates higher than 60 Hertz at a 4K resolution. So you can get a higher refresh rate than that if you go lower, as we saw in the previous part of the video. We went through the various different input lags. But yeah, at 4K resolution, you can't actually go higher than 60 frames a second or 60 refreshes of the screen per second, a refresh rate of 60 Hertz, without without going to something like DisplayPort, which most televisions don't have. So in the case of this TV, even though we have 120 Hertz native refresh rate on the panel, we can't actually input more than 60 Hertz or 60 frames per second into the TV. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. And cheaper TVs will often have a lower limitation on that. So a lot of TVs won't actually allow you to go over 30 Hertz on a 4K resolution, and that's where you really do start to see a degradation in the quality. You start to get ghosting between pixels and stuff like that. So all of these things were factors in choosing this TV. Another reason I chose this TV as well is it does give you a lot of control over what sort of picture processing takes place. So this TV has actually been specifically designed for people that want to play games, so whether that be on Xbox or PC or PlayStation or whatever. They give you a lot of options in the menu to actually take out a lot of the image processing that would normally take place on a TV signal to lower those input lags even further. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to jump into the TV's menu, and I'll show you what some of those options are and how I've configured them. Okay, so jumping into the menu of the TV, we'll go across, and I apologize you can't see the bottom of the TV here because it's blocked by the wheel, but we'll do the best we can here. So go into the menu, everything should be visible from here. So first thing we need to do, which is super important, is enable the gaming mode. So what that does is that disables a lot of the picture engine stuff that would normally process the image and makes the signal get from the input to the actual panel much faster, to put it in simple terms. So we go down to General and External Device Manager, and we'll scroll down to Game Mode Settings, and we'll make sure that that is turned on. Now from here we can also turn on Game Motion Plus and enable blur reduction, judder reduction, and clear motion, which is like a LED blinking thing. Those are designed to help us avoid ghosting between frames and things like that. Now, I haven't found the need to switch that on really. Everything looks pretty good to me, but that's sort of a personal preference thing. You can fiddle around with that if you want to and switch that on. Switching it on, things look a little bit more vibrant, but yeah, no real discernible difference in terms of overall quality, I don't think, at least. FreeSync there, I'm leaving that turned off because my PC is not FreeSync compatible. My graphics card is an NVIDIA graphics card, and NVIDIA use their own proprietary system for this. What that does is that reduces things like frame tearing and artifacts where the refresh rate of the screen doesn't match the output rate or the frame rate of the actual TV. So we'll leave that off for now. So from there, a lot of it comes down to personal preference, but there's a couple more settings that I think are important. So HDMI UHD color, we switch that on for the port that we're going to be using, and what that allows is the full color profile to be used without the bandwidth reduction that you would normally get. A lot of broadcast quality and things like Netflix and stuff actually compress the image data a little bit more than is actually necessary to save on bandwidth, and that reduces the color gamuts very slightly. But leave this on for the case of using for a PC because we don't really need to turn it off. HDMI black level, we can adjust that if we want to, and basically it just adjusts the depth of black for a bit of realism. I like to sort of have not too deep a black because I want it to look relatively realistic. So back out of there, Input Device Manager, we don't really need to change anything here because we're not using anything there. Device Connection Manager is just like a wizard that allows you to go through and set up new devices. Smart features, again, we don't need to do anything there. So we'll scroll back across, back up to picture. Now, obviously the important thing here is that we are in game mode. Picture size settings, you can adjust your aspect ratio here, and also tell it to match the screen or zoom to fit the entire panel. Because we're running at the screen's native resolution, we don't need to worry about that. Go down to expert settings. So from here we can adjust things like our backlight, brightness, contrast, sharpness, things like that. So the one thing that I'm noticing straight away here is that you can probably, I don't know whether it'll come across on the camera, but the sharpness is a little bit over exaggerated. We're kind of getting that almost like a stroke effect going around some objects. So we'll go back in and adjust that quickly first. And again, because we want to minimize the amount of processing that's going on by the picture engine inside the TV to minimize the amount of input lag, it's important to try and crank as much of this stuff down as possible. So sharpness, we're going to turn that down to, where does it look good? So that's starting to look a little bit too sharp. 0, I can probably get away with 0. I think that looks pretty good. So yeah, we'll leave that off. We go up to contrast. So and I'm just going to reduce the contrast slightly, I think. That looks good. Again, this is sort of just personal preference stuff. It's also way too bright at the moment too, so I'm going to turn down the backlight. That's much better. And then brightness, that's going to adjust our black level, so we can do that. And I maybe made it a little bit too dark there, so I'm just going to go and turn the backlight up just a little bit more. Yeah, about there's good, I think. Now the other important thing to note here is that we are using HDR color mode as well. So if we go into our preferences of the actual game and go down to graphics options here, video mode, you can see there HDR is set to on. So if we were to switch that off, obviously we lose a lot of the depth of color. Again, that's sort of a personal preference thing. HDR does put a slightly larger load on the graphics card because you're having to process a wider color gamut. So it really comes down to your own personal preference there. But that's how I think I'm going to set things up, and I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. It looks very smooth, and again, there's minimal input lag there. There's a little bit of noticeable lag on the steering wheel, but yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so the gloves are on. It is time to put this all to the test and see whether I've got this right or whether I've screwed up massively getting a TV this big. So we'll jump into the same time trial that we did before. Now, I'm not going to be doing lap time testing this time because obviously I need to do a little bit of practice with this setup before I really get into it. So this is, I've done a little bit of playing with the wheel already, but I haven't really used it on this screen yet. And so I'm probably going to be absolutely horrendous, but I'm really excited to see how this goes. So we'll jump back to Belgium again, which is my track that I usually use for this kind of thing, and see how it all goes. So it's a very different seating position to what I'm used to as well. Oh, wow. Oh. Oops. I think I might have missed my braking point there. We might try restarting quickly. It's just so different to what I'm used to. All right. This is crazy. It's, oh man, it's so awesome because I'm actually, like, I'm turning my head the amount that I would in real life, and the ratio of turning with the wheel and everything is really, really accurate. So you can see the amount that I'm turning the wheel to go around corners in real life is the amount that the wheel's actually turning on the screen as well, which is really cool. But yeah, just having to look around and really spot my apexes, you really get a sense of when the car's moving around underneath you. And obviously I'm not fast because I'm not experienced with this wheel or anything yet, but you really feel the understeer, you feel it washing out from underneath you. But I think that, I think the thing that's making it really immersive here, I'll just pause for a second. The thing that's making it really immersive is the fact that, you know, you're really actually having to turn your head and look around proportionately to what you'd be doing in real life. So if I want to look at a mirror, I actually have to turn my head and look at the mirror. It's not just there. So I'm not just moving with my eyeballs. Like even with the 38-inch Dell screen that I was using before, it still didn't give that kind of realistic perspective of having to actually look around your environment to drive the car properly. So this is a lot more realistic, and it'll be interesting to see what it's like driving in traffic with other cars, but we'll look at that a little bit later on. I just wanted to give you a basic overview now, but we'll jump back in again. And the seating position, like, it's probably not quite as reclined as a real Formula One car, but it really does give you that sense of actually being inside something. Like even with the side pods of the car here as well. When we turn in, you'll see when you see the side pod of the car kind of looking in your peripheral vision, it's really realistic. And it kind of, I think one of the things that makes computer games a little bit unrealistic sometimes is the focus that you have. So, for example, like when you're looking here on a normal smaller screen, everything's kind of in focus in your field of view. So you kind of you don't know what you're looking at, and it's a little bit distracting. And that's kind of the reason why I had to turn off the halo bar, because in real life you're kind of focusing past that. But on a computer screen, you're kind of looking straight at it, and it's really distracting. So actually, I might just try switching the halo bar back on quickly. We're going to our camera settings, camera options, and go down to the halo column. And I'll explain to you in another video as well how I've got this set up so I'm actually navigating the menus and stuff. I've got a little keyboard sitting beside me here. But we'll switch the halo back on and see if it's still distracting. That was horrendous. It's a shame that they don't have the gear display on the wheel. I'll have to see if I can adjust that. But yeah, look, I'm actually not finding the halo distracting. I don't think. Yeah, because I'm having to look around the environment, the halo is not distracting me like it would before. I mean, like, it's weird having it right in the center of your view, and it is still kind of, it's still in focus. Like, your eyes don't focus past it like they would in real life, but because of the amount that I'm having to actually turn my, like when I'm turning a corner, I'm looking here, I'm not looking here. So I'm actually, you know, my eyes aren't obstructed by the halo at all. So that's actually pretty cool. Like, I probably will leave it off for actual driving, but the difference there is quite interesting. So look, overall really impressed with the seating position. I think it's all going to be a lot to take in. I'm going to need to do a couple of races to sort of get my head around it all and get a little bit used to it before I try and pull some lap times. But yeah, look, I'm absolutely stoked with it. I'm really excited because, like I said at the start of the video, this isn't a setup that you could have had even just a couple of years ago. You couldn't have a screen this big with this field of view at this resolution at a decent frame rate and still have everything work properly. So it's pretty cool. So look, I think I've made the right choice in terms of my my setup. I'm glad that I went with this rather than a 3-monitor setup. We might try a triple monitor setup later on if we can get our hands on some screens and just see what the difference is like. But I think, yeah, it fills my peripheral field of view really well. It doesn't really matter that it's not wrapping around massively. I think that, you know, the curve is so gradual and so slight that it probably doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But it'd be interesting to see the difference if I did have a flat screen, whether it would look any different to me. But yeah, like, it'd be cool if the screen kind of wrapped around a little bit more and really filled my peripheral. Like, if it had a steeper angle and kind of came out to here, it'd be really great. But as it sits right now, when I'm driving, I really am not distracted by anything outside my field of view. Like, it's kind of only, it's hard to sort of explain on camera, but it's kind of just, like, this is filling probably 90% of my field of view, and then the rest is just, you know, out of focus rubbish that I'm not really focusing on anyway. But it's really, really, really immersive getting into it. So look, what we'll do in the next video, we've got a couple of more things to put together. Got a button box, which I'm going to show you how I built as well. We'll also be showing you how to set up the steering wheel properly, make all the adjustments necessary there, because I still haven't really done any calibration there. Everything's just sort of running as it does straight out of the box. So I'll take you through the menu options, how to set all that up, and yeah, we might do a bit more adjustment of the TV, things like that, and then we'll get into doing some lap times. So look, thank you very much for watching the video, guys. If you found it interesting and useful, please do hit that like button, hit the subscribe button as well so you don't miss the next one, and the notification bell, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.